purpose.
Will the gentleman yield for some questions, please?
The gentleman yields for questions.
Thank you. I appreciate your quotes. I don't think anybody in this body disagrees with them. It's really the details of your bill that we want to dive into. So I want to ask you some questions about real life scenarios. So if you don't mind turning to section 411 spot 559B of your bill.
What page are you on?
I'm not sure that we might have the same pages. Mine is in legal and it's on page 15. And the caption there is authority of officers.
Okay.
And I think the concept, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that a commissioned or non-commissioned officer of the unit may, to the extent consistent with the United States and Texas Constitution, arrest, apprehend, or detain persons crossing the U.S.-Mexico border unlawfully and deter persons attempting to cross the border unlawfully, including with the use of non-deadly crowd control measures. Did I read that correctly?
I believe that's basically an accurate reading.
So I'd like to understand in better detail how that would operate. How would one of these volunteers deter someone attempting to cross the border unlawfully?
Well, they're not volunteers. They are employees. They are non-commissioned officers.
How would they deter somebody from coming across the border
I'm answering your
unlawfully?
question, Mr. Anchía. They are not volunteers. They are non-commissioned officers under the authority of the governor, the authority of the Department of Public Safety.
I didn't ask about authority.
I'll get to your answer.
What I wanted to get to is how would they deter someone attempting to cross the border unlawfully?
I think there are a number of ways that might occur. Sometimes it could be physical barriers, but ultimately it depends on the facts on the ground.
So you use specific language there that describes non-deadly crowd control measures. Does that include tear gas?
Just a few days ago in El Paso.
Does it include tear gas?
Representative Anchía, I'm answering your question.
Okay.
Just a few days ago in El Paso, rocks were being thrown at the Border Patrol. And the way that they protected themselves was to use tear gas.
Would the BPU be able to use tear gas?
I think if the facts warranted that, they could.
Okay. Would they be able to use beanbag projectiles? Would the BPU be able to use beanbag projectiles?
I don't know.
Would they be able to use horses or ropes?
I think it's going to depend on the facts on the ground. I think that we're going to make sure that Texans are protected and that the officers are able to protect themselves. And in the specific case that I just mentioned,
so same answer on
the rocks were being thrown at the officers, and so the officers used a crowd control measure to protect themselves.
Okay. So now let's turn to section 411-564 on page 18, and that's entitled, and if we have the same page number, it's entitled Article 1, Section 10, Invocation. Okay. Now, there it talks about the circumstances under which a unit chief and director may order the unit and the department to, quote, deter, repel persons attempting to enter the state unlawfully at locations other than ports of entry. How would a member of the unit deter a person from attempting to enter unlawfully?
I think that's going to be based on the facts on the ground, the terrain, the geography.
How would a member of the unit repel a person from attempting to enter the unit? Would that involve, for example, physically pushing them back into the river? Is that how they would deter someone from entering Texas unlawfully?
They are going to use measures that are appropriate for the situation.
I'm sorry?
There's over 1,200 miles of border. There's various terrain, various situations, and I think you're going to allow the officers on the ground to make a decision about what might be effective.
And that could include pushing them back into the river.
Those are your words.
Right? All right,
Those are your words.
So you do not want to answer that question? Is that? How about returning aliens to Mexico who have been observed actually crossing the Texas-Mexico border unlawfully and were apprehended, detained, or arrested in the vicinity of the Texas-Mexico border? How would a member of the unit return aliens to Mexico? This is the BPU.
Humanely and professionally.
I'm sorry?
Humanely and professionally.
Okay, but how? Sort of, physically? Would they put them in a truck? Again, I'm trying to understand your intent here. What would you permit them to do in your bill?
We are legislators. We are not the executive who implements. And so what we will do is we will give guidance in law to the governor, just as we do in many other scenarios.
And what guidance would you give them on what the parameters of your bill is?
And so we would
we're not getting a lot.
Mr. Speaker, if he's going to talk over me, we can't have a conversation.
So what kind of guidance would you give as the bill author as to your intent?
The language that's in the bill.
Okay. And so I'm asking about that specific language in the bill. I understand you may not want to answer it, but how would a member of the unit return aliens to Mexico? How would that sort of physically happen?
I think it would be up to the officers on the ground to determine, based on the geography, the situation, coordination with local law enforcement, how that would be conducted.
Okay, let's talk about how an officer becomes a member of the BPU. And this is in your bill, section 411-5555. What are the requirements to become a member in your bill?
A member of?
The BPU.
So that'll be a mixture of licensed peace officers and non-commissioned officers. So some will have to have a peace officer's license, as is already outlined in state law.
But what is the requirement under your bill? You said some of them, but are there minimum requirements that you put in your bill for how one would be a member of the BPU?
You can look at section 411.561, qualifications and standards. So must hold a peace officer license and meet any other qualifications set by the commission. And there are a number of things that the commission routinely requires of officers as far as code of conduct, standards, and things like that.
So you would defer to the commission on that front?
On the qualifications.
Okay. And what does it mean to be a member of the BPU? Will this person be considered an employee, staff, personnel, or volunteer? And I think you answered that. You said these will be employees, right?
They're going to be paid through the state of Texas.
Okay, so members will be paid. All right, let's look really quickly at section 411-5557 on page 11. And that says that the BPU chief, quote, shall employ as necessary commissioned and non-commissioned officers and other employees to perform unit and operation functions, end quote. Did I read that correctly?
Sorry, Mr. Anchía, will you refer again to the section?
Sorry, 411-5557.
What page are you on?
It's on page 11.
On page what?
11.
Section 7?
Yes, sir. So in that section, what does employ mean?
Person who's employed by the department.
Does that mean
by the commission?
Okay, they are hired, they are employees. What does perform unit operations mean for commissioned and non-commissioned officers? Perform unit operations.
It's a general statement. It might be someone who is performing an administrative function. It might be someone who's performing a logistics function or computer technology. It runs the gamut.
Okay, so that's a broad term. It's not defined in the bill, right?
What is not a broad?
Sorry, perform unit functions. You're construing that broadly. It's not defined in the bill. Is that correct?
Well, the unit has functions that are
being performed, right?
That are enumerated at times in the bill.
Okay. So how will they carry out those duties and requirements? Can you provide a couple of examples of how they would carry out those duties and requirements?
Not quite sure what you're looking for, Mr. Anchía.
Some examples of duties or functions that
I've already stated some.
I'm sorry?
I've already stated some.
Can you reiterate them, please?
Logistics.
For the benefit of the body?
Logistics, information, technology, etc.
Do you anticipate they would face off with migrants as well?
They might encounter, I don't know, quite frankly.
So
if you're
your
in an
bill
office,
doesn't envision
if you're
them...
sitting in an office, you might encounter any number of persons.
So are most of these jobs office jobs?
That will be up for the department to determine.
Your intent is that you just stated that if you're in an office, you might encounter migrants. So would these BPU members be is your intent that they be members of an office corps, or that they also be out in the field?
That's going to be up to the Border Protection Unit Chief to assign employees to the relevant jobs and tasks that are necessary.
And you will defer to them, and you have no intent on the matter?
The intent is to have licensed peace officers, non-commissioned officers, and other employees as the bill states.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.